So Ace Did
Awesome.
Events has been around for 5 years. We did all live events, typically well over the 200 marker every year. But last year, as you know, was a special year. And it turned out to be our best year, revenue wise. And we produced about 169 events, I want to say.
Wow. 169 events. And yes, last year was a
Yeah.
special year indeed. That's a good way of putting it, right?
Yeah.
So we all sort of have that memory of the pandemic settling in and sort of people making that first pivot to virtual. Many, of course, jumped to the Zoom methodologies and things along those lines. Can you talk to us about how did you guys make that pivot? What was your first foray into virtual? And I guess it begs the question, was it with the pandemic, or were you involved in some virtual and hybrid events before the pandemic?
Right. Actually, no. So Aced
Okay.
Events was mostly live. We did do some live streams, but it was never a focus on virtual. So which is very interesting. And then when March hit, I think I was like everyone else, frozen and kind of like in that fear mode, listening to the vicious news cycle initially. And then just started to realize that all of the events, I think it was the week of probably March 15, somewhere along there, we had a lot of industry events going on. And I'm fortunate to be invited to these events, and they all were canceled. So we're
Hmm.
talking 5 events in 1 week. And so I quickly realized that, we're in trouble. So what is the solution? So I started to call colleagues and reached out to basically a lot of people that I've worked with in the past and just said, people who were already familiar with the virtual world, and asked what they were doing. And, that seemed to make the most sense at the time. So I started partnering with those companies that were already doing virtual events and, selling them to my clients. But I quickly realized there wasn't a lot out there. And so I'm also fortunate to have a lot of talent that I've worked with in the past. So I said, it's time to start creating my own. So basically starting another company.
Interesting. Interesting. All right. I want to learn more about that. And I want to start with, what did you think from your traditional experience? What were aspects of an event that you expected would translate into virtual and were very quickly perhaps challenged? Or things that you just couldn't realize in a virtual world that were different than the traditional?
So that's actually an interesting question. I didn't see much of I didn't want to focus on what we couldn't do, right? Because I felt like everything was very negative as it already was. And I think, you want to focus on solutions, right? So when clients have questions, I need to have some sort of solution. So I think for me, it was about teaching the client what the benefits are from virtual. Like, it's getting them to accept the fact that there are no live events. Like, we need to move on. It's not happening. And the companies that made that decision very early on are the ones that benefited the most from the virtual events. So we quickly started to realize that there's very little risk involved with a virtual event. And I know that sounds crazy, but you have to think of it this way. There is no cost of a venue. There's no cost of food and beverage. Basically, the only thing they were paying for was talent at the time. So, and the good news about the talent was they're not traveling. So their price points were much cheaper. And guest counts, typically when you book a venue, you are committed to a certain amount of people. Virtual, there were no guest limits anymore. So if they have, which most clients do, they have a per person price that they cannot exceed, whether that's 100 a person, 200 a person, whatever it is. But the more people you invite, the cheaper that price goes down. So overall, it was much more beneficial, expense wise.
So yeah, that's interesting. I mean, you start out with the opportunity to create something from scratch, What did you say to clients that were trying to figure out the benefit of, outside of the value prop that you just shared? How do you kind of go about addressing their questions? And perhaps I'm curious, what kind of questions were coming up in those early days of virtual? I feel like there were so many, right? So.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And the crazy thing is who knows? It's like, you don't know. It's like, we've never done this before. I was getting asked all these crazy questions like, what are your top 5? What are your top 5 virtual experiences? Which one should we start with? And I'm like, look, I'd love to tell you what the top 5 are, but it's like day 5 and I have no idea. So, honesty, I'm all about full transparency. And I tell the clients exactly the way it is. Look, there's little risk in a sense of you would be spending a lot more on a live event as you are on a virtual event. So I think we take our chances and execute and then go from there. And that was a really important step to make, is to just do it. It's true what they say, and I say this all the time, doing something is better than doing nothing. So we decided to take that leap, and we built the knowledge from there. And within 3 months, we did know what the top 5 were, and we did see ROI. And clients were, pretty impressed with what was happening.
Yeah, that's very cool. And I think we all face those questions. And it's one of the things that we love here at the Institute is the fact that there is no playbook. There is no white paper you can go out and download that tells you how to do this. We are all getting to experience perhaps a once in a career lifetime of disruption to a number of industries coming together and really getting to write the rules and to do some trial and error. So I guess that begs the question for me, a couple months in for you with the number of events that you were involved with and producing, what are some tips you can share that what did work, what didn't work? I mean, we often talk about failures here because we can learn so much from them. So,
So I'll tell you an example. So I do like to focus on the positives and what goes well, right? But I think as an event planner or a production specialist, your job is to always be raising the bar. You're basically only as good as your last event. So when it comes to what went well and what didn't, I always look for the client's feedback. If they thought the event went well, then boom, it's a home run. But again, as an event planner, you're always seeking out what you could have done better to improve it. So one valuable lesson that I learned very early on, we were doing an event with a chef, and it was, a great chef. But I think, looking back in hindsight, this was again very early on, and people were, desperate for business. So I think many said that they could do things that maybe they were not set up to actually be doing. And what I mean by that is we were shipping out meal kits. So one of the things that we did for this particular client is the chef comes up with a menu. The client wants to ship out all the ingredients necessary to make that dish. And then they all follow the chef along and make the dish together, which is a huge success. However, again, this being very early on, all of the meal kits showed up inedible. And we're talking 80 people. And now, not only was this a new client for me, it was shipping to their customers. So that became a valuable learning experience, needless to say.
Sure.
So, I always believe in something Pitbull says, which he's a very, celebrity musician who I love. There's no failure, only learning. And that's true in this case, because even though I did do my research on what's required for meal kits, I was trusting the chef and their experience with regards to shipping and packaging, that they were familiar with the process. But again, it was during COVID, there were shipping delays, the packaging was not, didn't work out. And that's, and that was what happened. So not a good scenario, right? But again, this is like anything, we're learning. So now we have strategic measures in place when it comes to the food prep and shipping and packaging and all of those things that we've now learned.
Sure.
So I would say that's an example of something that required, a misfortune in order to learn a very, very valuable lesson.
Sure. And in a sense, it's funny, we kind of hear, I don't know if you've heard this feedback, but sometimes there's this perception that because it's virtual, it's less than. And the reality is what you just described is it's actually more than. It takes a whole other level of coordination that you might not have to do, and we're different than what you do in a traditional or a in-person event. So I think that's very interesting. You had to really kind of hone how you were delivering those food kits and coordinating that with your event date and all that. So it's definitely interesting. What's something that did go well? Because I don't want to focus solely on the negative. So I want to hear, I know you've had so many good experiences, and I know you're not going to brag to us. So I want you to brag to us. Share with us some of those people you've worked with. I mean, you have such a roster of talent you've worked with. I'd love to hear about that, and of course, a correlating success.
Yeah, I'm fortunate to have a lot of fun talent. I think especially with these experiences, when your clients are trying to hit that C-level target of their customers, it has to be something very interesting, especially now with Zoom fatigue, and creating an experience that is more exciting, that will want people to attend, right? So what differentiate those are, celebrity talent. So I've been fortunate enough to work with Keith Urban. I mean, that was a massive concert. We did a live stream to over 5,000 people, and that was a huge success. And the platform worked. When you're dealing with, as you know, production, there's all different platforms out there to deliver content. But since most people haven't maybe used it before, you just don't know. So you do tests, and then you run with it. And we ran with it. And the platform that we chose worked great. But again, you learn as you go, right? Some platforms are only one-way communication. We know that now. It's always nice to have a two-way communication, but some two-way communication platforms don't allow for this enormous guest count without room for more risk of, the line dropping, and other variables that could potentially go wrong. So these are things, again, that we learned along the way. Some other talent that I've really had a great time working with, we do a lot of fireside chats. We did Scottie Pippen, John Daly, Jerry Rice, and celebrity chefs. I had the fortunate experience to work with Michael Simon and Jeffrey Zakarian. So we're talking the best of the best here. And, they do drive attendance. That's the point. Drive attendance and impress your customers. That's what my clients want. That's what I focus on.
Yeah. And, you raised some very interesting points there. I mean, obviously we all love to hear the names and hear what those experiences have been. But, earlier you mentioned that there's, in some sense, was zero investment on the early days of virtual, but you just brought up an important piece of the equation that I think affects event professionals and marketing pros that are watching and learning from us here today in platform. And we often have the conversation about what does the right platform look and feel like. There's been a little bit of a debate. Does it become a one size fits all? Or are we going to sort of emerge into a world that's a best of breed for different parts of the platform experience? So I guess, let me just ask you, what is your perspective on platform? Obviously, one-way, two-way communication, a very important piece of the puzzle that people don't necessarily think about at first glance. What else might you share from your experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all, those are all valid questions. And I think we're still learning, right? But I don't think it's a one size fits all, just because, as you know, every event is different. Most events do have to be customized to some extent. And also the first question really for anything is, what is the client's goal? So that's the number one question everyone should ask. Start there, find out what your client's goal is, and then build from there. So I always have that conversation first with my clients, and really dig in as to, do you want your guests interacting with the talent? Do you want them to be able to ask questions live? Do you want them to just ask questions through the chat? So there's all different ways that you can cut this. And the issue is, based on those, then you find the platform that fits what you're looking to do. Like, for example, for the Keith Urban one, initially we did want that interaction and we did want them to be able to show video. But they also wanted a very secure platform with minimal risk of dropping. So that's when we decided to do the one-way communication. And we actually had Keith Urban's team run the video and take on that responsibility so that the client could still show the video in the beginning and at the end, and then we could live stream it out to the guests. So I think it really just depends on kind of what they're trying to do.
Sure. And, the Keith Urban example, actually, I want to just dive a little deeper to clarify because there's a couple different sides to the experience, right? There's the experience for our attendees and our audiences, but there's also, for lack of a better term, our entertainer or presenter experience that of a Keith Urban, of how they're coming into an event like this. And so when you're talking about security of something that you wanted it secure for the audience, or did you want it secure from a no dropping? You wanted robust video for Keith's performance? Which side of the equation, just so we can further understand the example?
Right. So interesting. All of it, right? So secure, meaning the client was a security company. So secure is in no one could hack in, no one could get access to the live stream without having, permission through password protection and whatnot. So security on that side. And then also security stabilization, meaning, if it's a one-way platform, typically what we know now, and it's been my experience, is a one-way communication is more stable than a two-way. That's just kind of the research that we've come up with so far. But again, things are changing daily. Some of the production companies are finding out different ways. Everything is being tweaked in real time. And really, technology-wise, things are improving every day. So we could potentially find something that's two-way that's just as secure and stable as a one-way. At least that's my hope. Yeah. Because the more interactive, the better.
Absolutely. And I think that you're right, the technology is changing on a daily basis, and we're hearing of innovation. And I think that's one of the silver linings to the pandemic, is getting to observe this innovation firsthand and how it's changing the event experience, whether that's virtual or hybrid or whatever comes down the line. What's been your favorite feature set that you've seen? And perhaps it talks to my other question for you, would be about interactive. What's been kind of the best interactive experience that you've produced? So I don't know if those are two different answers or the same.
Yeah. I think for me, probably two different. I would say my favorite, I think because it was holiday time and it was very light and fun. Not that the other ones weren't, of course they all are, but I would say we did a fireside chat with Chevy Chase and Beverly D'Angelo for National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Sure. So we interviewed them first and then live streamed the movie out to the clients. And the clients, we sent out movie kits for everybody to enjoy during the movie. It was just very nostalgic. And I think, the interaction part, right? This was, again, a one-way communication. So we did have the client hosting and interviewing the talent, but it was being live streamed to the guests. So the guests couldn't actually interact with the talent, but they could put stuff into the chat. They could type into the chat any questions or any comments they wanted to make, which is what the client wanted. And, the most fun was reading the chat. Everybody was just going back to their childhood. And, and this is, again, the end of 2020, right? So to see everybody that excited and that nostalgic feeling, like I remember when I was a kid watching this, they're so great. and Chevy and Beverly tag teaming off of each other, talking over each other. I mean, it was literally like you felt like you were watching, a continuation of the movie. And everybody was the chat was, just priceless.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And then I would say for more interaction, the chef experiences, and I think those are unique in a sense of, when do you ever get to ask a celebrity chef a cooking question? So basically, we let people stay on camera and unmute themselves to ask a question. I feel like now people are very familiar with Zoom. They understand how it works. Mute yourself if your dog is barking. So they will unmute and ask the chef a direct question. And you're seeing the chef in his home cooking. Like, these are very unique experiences that you would not get even at a live event,
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, all right, I have two, eye on the clock. I know we're getting close to our time here, but I have two questions for you. The first is, for those that are watching that are first stepping into virtual, or perhaps they're looking to sort of up their game in virtual, building on what they did last year, or maybe it's the first time that they're really stepping in. Maybe they stepped out of events for the last year during the pandemic. What's a tip or two to help them kind of get started? They're watching our show, they're hearing about the great success that you've had, they're thinking about what questions they would have asked Chevy Chase, and they're thinking about how they move forward with their own events. Where do you recommend they start? What's something that maybe was an early learning for you that would be helpful to somebody first watching our show today?
I think the most important thing is to take action, do something. It's science. Objects in motion stay in motion. Don't wait for anything or anyone. I think that's what delayed a lot of folks in the very beginning. They were waiting for something to happen and it didn't happen. So that's my advice. And if you're looking to start doing virtual events, find someone who's done what you want to do and reach out and ask for help. I mean, that's the whole reason why I enjoy doing these speaking engagements, because I want to help other people, especially in this industry and in the hospitality industry. We took a huge hit. I know many companies that are not coming back from this, and it's devastating. And restaurants, the same. So it's reinvention time to reinvent yourself. And I would say, don't try to reinvent the world. I mean, the wheel. If you're looking, to do something, find someone who's already done it and reach out. Most people are willing to help. And with social media today, you can find anyone. Sometimes when I'm looking for talent, I literally will go on Instagram and DM them and say, hey, that's how it started last year. I was like, some talent that I wanted that I wasn't necessarily already working with, I would just go on Instagram and reach out to chefs or athletes, whoever, and just say, this is what we're doing. Are you interested? And yes, people want to work. They are interested. And people want to share ideas. So that would be, my first recommendation, is to find someone that you can ask questions.
Yeah, and I think speaking to action, it's kind of interesting to think about sort of the social media world that we're living in now, where communication with just about anyone is easier. You can reach out and you can find ways to bring guests together and build thought leadership and bring people together for whatever kind of event you're looking to do. There's so much goodness to be had, and that virtual events, in a sense, are allowing us to build on that and really create a new level of experiences. So I couldn't agree more. As you look forward, you think about later part of 2021 and even a little early, but into 2022 and beyond, where do you get the sense, kind of reading the tea leaves of what's out there, the event industry and the hospitality industry goes from here? Are you somebody that thinks virtual goes away, or does virtual play a role? What's your perspective?
Yeah, I don't think it's going away. Virtual is here to stay, and it will be a hybrid for sure. Hopefully we do get back to live events. I was ambitious in thinking that hopefully it would be this year. But based on what my clients are deciding within their own companies, I'm not sure. I don't know that we'll be doing live events this year. But I would be hopeful to say that we will be back to that next year. But I think this year there may be some more forms of hybrid where you're potentially renting out a venue, you have the talent there, and you're live streaming out to your guests. And maybe there's some people in person at a smaller number, and you're live streaming out to a larger audience. So that's how I see the hybrid working, and hopefully that's the case this year. And I think, again, the thing here is to stay connected, right? And not much has changed. What I tell my clients is anything we were doing live, we can do virtual. And I mean that, like anything we've done before, we can do virtually. So nothing has changed in a sense of creativity. The only thing that's changed is the delivery. So we're delivering the same connection, the same, experience, the same kind of, talent, excitement that we've had before, just in a different way.
Very cool. I couldn't agree more. I think that we have just started to tap into a new level of experiences that really are culminating from the technology that's before us and the social media, and building on the shoulders of the traditional events that we're all used to producing. So awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time, Alicia.
Thank you.
I really appreciate
This
it.
was so fun.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah,
and speaking of staying connected, I mean, I know you're already a member of the Institute. Obviously, anyone watching, we welcome you to check us out. We're on LinkedIn, Twitter. So Alicia, thank you for taking the time.
Thanks, Jason. It was a pleasure. Have a great day.